There's another question here that I think goes back to the conversation. We see ourselves as a community that is concerned about lots of things, but one thing we're concerned about is the ecosystem.
Yeah.
We're concerned about the climate. We're concerned about sustainability. We're concerned about how do we make sure that we leave this world the way in which it needs to be left for the next generation of leaders, so that they have the clean water, they have the kind of justice system that we need them to have, all these other kinds of things. So the question that someone has asked is, what is the city doing to take steps towards carbon neutrality, sustainability, and eco-justice?
It's a great and critical question. So when I was in college and I was doing all this thinking, I actually didn't, the thinking that I did on this topic, and I joke with some of my friends who have convinced me otherwise, I always thought that like an environmentalist was somebody who like could afford hemp clothing and like, you know, hybrid vehicles and like all organic food and all that type of stuff. And ironically, I couldn't figure out a way to be an environmentalist in an economically sustainable way for myself, right? And I think one of the good things has been we sort of figured out a different lens on this, right? And realized the extent to which our climate efforts and our changing climate, the impacts that it has happen in our lowest income communities first. It happen in our communities of color first. Like they impact our communities so greatly. We have, you know, right along this kind of I-94 stretch, purely coincidentally, this happens to be the highest traffic area in the state as far as vehicle traffic, and there's some of the highest incidents of child asthma in the state, right? What a coincidence, right? And so, you know, we have to figure out how to do better by our earth, and we have to figure out, ultimately I think we have to figure out that there's really no difference between doing better by our earth and doing better by our people, right? That it's literally one and the same thing. It's challenging, frankly, because it's hard to be encouraged around climate change. Right? It's hard to feel like super encouraged around the research that comes out, right? I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm clairvoyant, I'm a psychic. Next week, there's gonna come a study, it's gonna tell us it's worse than we thought, right? And the week after that, there's gonna come another study that's gonna tell us it's even worse than last week's study, right? Like that's the direction that we're going. And it's really harsh and it's really bleak, and especially in the context of a federal government that's pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, right? Which is a terrible, horrible thing. That doesn't make me proud. But what does make me proud is this. I am one of about 400 Mainers across our country who stood up after the U.S. pulled out the Paris Climate Accord and said, no, the U.S. is going to meet our goals. We're going to meet our commitments under the Paris Climate Accord. And the great thing is when 400 local communities stand up and say, we're going to do this as a country, we're going to do it. And so, you know, I end up speaking about this quite a bit, and it's funny because people don't look at St. Paul. People think about climate change and climate crisis, they don't automatically think of a city like St. Paul, right? But if you grew up in St. Paul, you probably have noticed that our winters are different than they used to be, right? If you look at our streets, the status of our streets, you might notice that they look and feel different than they used to be. Right? And if you live or go to the east side or the west side, you might have noticed a couple of years ago that we had a rock slide off of the bluffs above Wabasha Avenue that dropped 400,000 pounds of rock onto the street below. Now, I will always remember that happened on the last Saturday of April in that year, because if it had happened the first Saturday of May, it would have been on top of our annual Cinco de Mayo parade. And I will never forget that. And so you may know, you may not know, we had our wettest year on record in 2019, that of the 10 biggest flood levels we've ever had on the Mississippi River, 3 of them happened in the last decade, like ever on record, right? And then just last year we had our highest consistent like flood level kind of flooding on the Mississippi River. You may not know the millions of dollars that all of those things cost us as a community every single year, but let me tell you, climate change is impacting your life every single day right here in St. Paul. So we gotta know that. To nerd out for a minute, 60% of our emissions in St. Paul come from buildings, and 30% come from transportation. So we just passed this climate action and resilience plan plan, passed it through the council in December. We've been working on it for a very long time. That really centers around those two things, buildings and transportation. Where buildings are concerned, you guys know the TV show The Biggest Loser? We created a game like that for building owners, right? To see who can reduce their energy use. We've got about 200 buildings that have signed up to benchmark their energy use and to have this challenge. And we have, I don't remember the exact number, but we have reduced our energy use in buildings in the city significantly and considerably. We actually just passed an ordinance mandating that businesses just benchmark their energy use. And the great thing is, we don't have to twist any arms. It's not like, environment versus business. Once these businesses just start looking at it and identifying it, they have all kinds of kind of business goal kind of drivers to say, we want to kind of bring this down. We as a city, for example, we just created in my first budget, we created a $5 million internal loan fund to just do simple things like replacing light bulbs with LED lights in our rec centers and our fire stations. Our goal is to get done with that process by the end of this year. And again, it's a $5 million internal loan process that ironically is going to pay off. It's going to break even in just a matter of a few years. And after that, we expect that to be about somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 a year in savings to taxpayers in reduced energy costs in the first place. And so, continuing that process with our streetlights, with our buildings, making our buildings more energy efficient, a lot of those things can get us a long way as far as kind of our energy use in buildings. Where transportation is concerned, that's really critical as well, obviously. And here's the kicker: we don't really have a choice. St. Paul is growing so fast. At our 2010 census, our population was about 285,000 people. We're knocking on the door of 320,000 people now, right? We have added literally 30,000 people to our city in the last 10 years. We are right about at our record population, all-time high right now, and we've got 20 years of projected growth in front of us right now. And so we have to start now thinking about the fact that we got thousands more people who need to get around. We got thousands more people who need housing in our community, thousands more children who need school space in our schools, thousands more people calling 911 in an emergency. It's really to the point where it's not about figuring out how to do more of the same. It's about fundamentally thinking about how we do it differently. The biggest example is transportation. That's what made me think of it, because there's just not if we were going to say how many lanes are we going to add to University Avenue to accommodate 60,000 new vehicles, that would be insane. We have to think about building out our transit system. We have to think about building out low carbon and no carbon mobility options. So our goal is for 90% of St. Paul residents to live within a 10-minute walk of a low carbon and no carbon mobility option. And one of the cool, amazing kind of big moonshot things that we're doing right now with a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies is building out a network of electric charging stations. So our goal is, in the same way as you can't have a car if there's no gas station, right? You can't have an electric car if there's no charging stations. And so we're building out a network across the Twin Cities, so we have 35 in St. Paul, 35 in Minneapolis, of electric charging stations that would be good for electric cars or bikes or scooters or whatever else you want to do. And we are setting out to be the first community in the nation to create an electric vehicle car share powered by 100% renewable energy. So we're excited about that as well.